Welcome back to the Doulas No Squat Book Club. This week we are discussing Breastfeeding Without Birthing, a breastfeeding guide for mothers through adoption, surrogacy, and other special circumstances. We'll be covering topics including antiquated advice, educating partners, and helping separated infants to grieve their birth mothers. Thank you so much for joining us today, and let's get ready to hear from some doulas who know squat.
I guess this is always a fun topic for doulas, but how do you handle situations whenever your clients have been given like really antiquated breastfeeding advice from a pediatrician?
I've heard that before, but this may want to seek a second medical.
I'm so careful to always preface any conversation that I don't agree with medical staff by saying, I am non-medical and therefore I do not have an opinion. And I would just like to expose you to another option because that's my job. I always start with that. And that's exactly how I say it every time. And I've actually had clients that I'll start that and they're like, and blah, 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 it's your job. What? Okay. So, or they'll go to ask me a question. They're like, and we understand you're non-medical. Continue. Because that does need to be taken into account for any advice that I give. Yeah. You know, there have been situations where someone was given breastfeeding or pumping advice that was the opposite of what I had known. And then I've turned to my expert here and she's like, no, you're wrong. I'm like, okay, good. So I'm glad that I prefaced it with, and then I was able to go back to my client and say, hey, actually, guess who had I exposed you to old information or whatnot, and say that is still technically an option. But the track that you're on is actually, that was good advice. And so I always try to keep that in mind for sometimes, but then of course I'm using specifically the word antiquated. I specifically know that's wrong. That's hard. And then I always ask who that person is, and I put them on my do not recommend list where, I ask, who was your pediatrician? And they use that name.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I like to ask if their pediatrician has had any specialized training in lactation.
Great question.
That's a good question. And one of my favorite things is if I'm talking to someone, I'm like, well, who's your doctor? Who are you going to see? And I'll quick search their name from some of the Facebook groups. I'll be like, oh, the doulas love so and so. You're in good hands. And they're like, fair enough. Okay, good.
Or you just look up to see what all letters do they have after their name?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't help but notice a complete lack of speeding related.
Yeah.
So, when was the last class they took on lactation within medical school in 20 years ago?
Yeah, continuing education is important for everyone.
Pediatricians are not trained in lactation. They would have to have individualized, pursue additional training.
Yeah, which is why I love practices like Bloom Pediatrics, because she is specialized in both. And yeah, I am shameless in name dropping here because she supports our mission. Milks out our clients sometimes.
She also runs a milk bank, which is awesome because the only milk bank in Missouri that through Human Milk Banking of America closed down 40 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been forever. And now she has a milk bank. So now that's something that's accessible to people again. And half clients purchase from them. You know? And anyway, so like there are options out there for pediatricians who are extremely like as qualified, IBCLC fully trained, ready to help you. And so, you know, just depending on what's accessible to different people and their preference and everything. But if somebody's ever asking me for like a list of recommended, who do you like working with, who of your past clients like working with, she's like, top, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like this is also part of like forming your support network before your before baby arrives. It's finding the medical professionals that are going to support you in your goal, which is same for birthing. It's like, what are your goals with breastfeeding, with birthing? What are the providers that are known to support that and
Exactly. And there's some very interesting preferences out there that make it to where you can't actually refer just straight up just to the same people every time. Because the people that you're working with, I had somebody tell me one time, I understand that you're probably going to recommend a lot of women to support me, but for some reason, I'm not very good at working with female doctors. And so she preferred that I find her a man. And I was like, okay, that's not something that I put into my let's weed this out. And it turns out I do actually recommend almost exclusively to women. So, research project for me. I was like, oh, I like working with women. That's a fun thing to learn about myself.
That's like a level of self-awareness too, that you're like, I hear you. Like, I believe you, because I don't think most people would like come forward with that.
Yeah, I was really glad that she felt that she could tell me that, because she was wanting her to switch to a different doctor. And she's like, I understand that you're probably going to recommend that I go to a female midwife because you speak very positively about a lot of the local female midwives. But I do feel the need to tell you that I just don't work well with female doctors, and I would prefer that my provider be a man. Okay.
Like, we get to work here.
Have a list of 1. That's not good. To the drawing board.
well, she gave you a to-do list. A project to do.
It was a fun project. I sorry.
But if you, as long as you have, you know, something in your back pocket for the people who
prefer men. It's fair. It's one the other way around.
All right. Chapter 3 is specifically written towards partners. So obviously this would be great advice for doulas as well. Anybody who is supporting a person who is lactating. One thing that I found really interesting was her emphasis on partners learning about breastfeeding management. Like, we want partners to be aware of how important it is to remove milk regularly to help support that milk supply. But she specifies that also learning stuff like about position and latch and how to use the breast pump, hand express, store milk, and how to overcome common difficulties. And that's a bit more than what I typically see partners get involved with the breastfeeding process. Do you have you come across partners that are that involved with the breastfeeding process? And like, how do you provide education for partners on breastfeeding management?
So when you have a partner that wants to be as involved as possible and they're attending all the prenatals, and if I'm there doing support, they're in the room helping and learning, then they're kind of fun. They're part of it. And I always emphasize prenatally, and then again at the birth, that whoever is going to be sleeping in the same space as this mom, you get to help support her in the middle of the night while she's learning how to breastfeed. So I assist with the first latch, and then whomever that is assists with the second one while I help them adjust, because that's just going to make everything go more smoothly. Because I mean, how often do you have somebody that's like, I just need a third hand to hold this head, or to hold my breast better, or to move the baby's hands out of the way, or, you know, all kinds of different things to. And so I always teach them exactly how I do it. And so, I mean, they've learned how to literally watch their partner for them. And they're going to be cleaning the pumping equipment when I'm not there. And, you know, they're a part of the learning. And the more that, I mean, they need to know how to properly store milk.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Like, the number of times that I run into, you know, just Facebook groups, because we're all women. My husband left the milk out and I cried and he didn't understand. And he thought that just by pouring it into the bottle and putting the bottle on the counter that he was helping. And I'm like, there was such a lack of education in this household. Like, how sad for her, but also he didn't know. He thought he helped, you know? So the more educated that everybody is in the home, then the less that we're just putting on, well, mom, you're the only one who knows how to do this. So I guess everything that has to do with feeding your baby is now your job.
Yeah. One thing that there's a section in here that she talks about be the left to her right. And it talks about how our mom brains kind of changed to be more active in the right. So we're more intuitive, and and it can take away from the ability to, you know, follow directions, keeping track of like numbers and different things. And for the partner,
anything.
well, you are instead of being able to remember how many times have you breastfed today and how many poopy diapers and all that stuff,
Which like boob did you use last?
You can't keep that in your head. You're instead relying more on intuition and like reading your baby, which is wonderful. But sometimes you get into these situations, like if you are in a special circumstance, especially and you're having problems with milk supply, or the baby's losing weight, those types of things where you really need to track all of those things. A partner who can be more like better at like the numbers and tracking, that is a wonderful way for them to get involved with feeding.
Yeah, shared apps where both partners have access. Honestly, sometimes I'm given access because I'm taking care of the baby too, and it's easier for them if I just put it straight into the app for them. I mean, it's teamwork, and then everybody is on the same page, and then, you know, the partner is then able to look and see and even learn just from the app itself. And it is going to depend on how much that partner is able to do there. You know, I'll have dads that work from home, for example. It's like very, very involved parent. They know absolutely everything, and it's great. You know, they're very involved. And then there's dads that like, I come in for the perinatal and it's been 2 days since she had the baby and he already had to go back to work. There is no paternal leave. And they're quite simply not able to be as knowledgeable about what's going on. But those apps can kind of, then when they are home on the weekends or in the evenings and whatnot, learn and help, and then have the app as almost like supplemental learning, so they can look back and reference to it.
So what kind of resources do you give to partners to kind of learn more of like the breastfeeding management. Because like in prenatals and stuff, like prior to birth, there's only so much time unless you want to have 4-hour prenatal.
Let me tell you. Yes. It's amazing. People are like, you should add that to your prenatal. You should add that to your prenatal.
Just
I
go
have
move
information
in
overload
with it.
where like you
Yeah.
give someone so much information that they can no longer process it. No,
Right.
that is not going in my
Yeah.
prenatal. It can happen. It does, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to remember anything because I said way too much in too short of a time span.
I just prefer talking to partners about lactation afterwards because it's just like not same. It's not going to be like a reality to them until afterwards.
There's so much research about partners bonding
Mhm.
with baby the first time they see baby. Sometimes it's the first time they feel, but for most partners, it's the first time they see baby. So talking about it beforehand kind of helps set a little bit of groundwork. But honestly, I haven't found that to be much more helpful than this is her boob. This is how you help her put it in the baby's mouth. Like this, you know? So as far as like giving them resources, I mean, they have the resource of my class and then I connect them with breastfeeding groups, but for the most part, I do mostly teach by show. And then especially if I'm there as a postpartum doula, I'm going to have a lot more time and availability to be able to, and I mean, I take them into the kitchen with me and I'm like, this is how I put the flange in the bottle and then I pour it in so I don't miss any. And I say what I'm doing out loud as I'm working so that they hear me and know what's going on and don't necessarily feel condescended to at any point. So I'm saying, and now I'm doing this and now I'm doing this and now I'm learning by being in the room and actually doing. That's how a lot of people learn. I do have people ask me for books and then I give them the same stuff I give to mom, like the woman learning breastfeeding. Do they read it?
Something to hold on to.
If you to have it on your counter and be like, look, I have this giant book about breast. I have read.
Or partner goes reads through it and highlights the for sure. Their significant other like, look, it says you should be helping change diapers right here.
So look at that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so do you ever have to kind of encourage the partner to be a more active participant in breastfeeding? It's like, how do you normally approach the partners that are like thinking that is her job? I don't know how I can leave or involve or
That's almost always the attitude. I think it's just kind of like, I can't do anything really.
It depends on their reasoning.
Yeah.
You know, are they saying that because of a lack of education on how they can't support? Then the best thing to do is teach them how. Like they're willing, but they don't know how. That's a completely different conversation than they're aware and they don't want to. You know, and you run into that. People will have this idea that, well, I'm going to work. She's not working. So she gets to do all of the household motherhood stuff. I do all of the fix the car, mow the lawn, go to work stuff. It's always worked. We're not deviating from this. You know, and then also, does mom feel that way? Mom shame is real and it is pervasive and it can not only stop people from asking for help, it can make them legitimately not want it. So it depends, you know, is he wanting to help because he knows that if he does, it will make her feel bad about herself? Then that's a very different conversation. So before you approach anything that has to do with any of this stuff, I think kind of this surmising of what I've kind of been saying for every how do you approach, get the background first. What's the why, you know? And that's gonna really change your conversation so much. The same conversation can have the exact opposite effect of what you're wanting, depending on the person's reason for not doing what you see as helpful. And maybe by the time once you get that context, it turns out, nope, wouldn't be helpful. We actually need to help mom get rid of her mom shame first.
That exact reasoning is why I feel like a lot of online breastfeeding advice becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like, if you are not taking the time to consider their situation before you answer their question, they're just information overload, or you could not have the entire picture. There are so many times that you can get onto these threads, someone asks a question and they're inserting their own situation into what is happening, that is not at all what's going on. Like, you can have a conversation about, like, someone asking about increasing their milk supply, but you have no idea what they're doing right now.
Goodness, I need to increase my milk supply. Well, how much water are you drinking? Oh yeah, let's just drown her in water. That's gonna up that supply. She only pumps twice a day, but you know.
Or like,
Just
I
wash out all the other stuff that you might need.
Yeah,
Like electrolytes.
let's not talk about exactly like.
It's like she only eats once a day too, but she's getting 12 cups of water in
Every single day, and that's it. That's all she's worried about.
I've had so many moms that come to me and like they're wanting help, and they always feel the need to preface like getting help with, I'm drinking plenty of water, and like needing to like feeling like they need to
Get that out of the way.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't want this advice. I've already been told that.
No, that's what everyone. Like, I'm sorry. My questioning if you're getting enough water would not even be on my top like 50 list of questions to ask.
There's so much context, and that's why when you're making an appointment with Jaime, it's gonna be over and out. Like, she's gonna be there for a long time because she needs a lot of context before she can answer that question. And just reading a little blurb is not gonna get you that, even from like serious professionals, you know. And that's how I can always tell the professionals from the people who are not when I'm reading. When someone says I'm looking for advice on, and the first thing that someone tries to do is get more context, then like that person actually knows, you know, versus, and man, I used to do this. I thought I was helping people. I'd be like, oh, here is all the advice, you know.
Yeah.
And now I'm a real professional.
I mean, we all go through that learning stage. It's like, I mean, it's similar with like being a birth professional as with being a lactation professional. If you've like gone through it yourself before, you feel like you have some sort of level of knowledge of how everything works. So then you're like, oh, there's actually a large variation that I'm not even aware. I don't even know what all the variations are that could affect this outcome. Like, I read the Womanly Art of Breastfeeding, and I breastfed 2 children, and or 3 children, and they all were fairly similar in how it all worked out. But then other families have other situations, and even just the family dynamic and
Mhm.
what is going to work for that family. Like, even if you take away the biological needs of breastfeeding, it's like, in this family situation, they need sleep. Like, if you're in a family that's having a very that is very sleep deprived, going and saying, oh, you need to now pump 3 times at night or whatever to get up your milk supply whenever they're on the verge of breaking. Like, maybe that would help their milk supply, but maybe the stress of it would just cause her to quit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like taking the individual into account.
Yeah, it's the nuance of it. And the nuance, like for her and for the partner, if there is one, you know.
Mm-hmm. And sibling can also play a part in how that all plays out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, especially like if you have Irish twins, that I was like,
Yep. Guess who dried up 10 months postpartum? There was no milk. I was pregnant. I was about to give birth again.
mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Whenever as soon as you reach that like 20-week point, that's your body is starting to think about producing the milk for the new baby, with the old baby.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if there's something there, it's a little bit blocked.
Can I ask you, like, what do you do in that situation?
You have to supplement if the baby is under, well, if you're getting close to a year, you can, and they're really good with solids, you can sometimes get by with just upping the solid intake. It's like probably around the 9 to 10 month mark, you could possibly get away with not supplementing. It depends on how much nutrition they are able to get from the breast milk. And then also, sometimes if you're able to prepare in advance and pump extra and have like a stash that you can supplement
like
with.
if someone tells you that that's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
And like,
that helps. If you're aware that it's even a thing you should prepare for, and not just, have no idea what's happening and then suddenly it's just gone.
Oh, goodness.
that's horrible. Yeah, there's some parents that want to have their children very close together, and like they can prepare like early on with like to pump extra and have stuff set aside because they want to get pregnant again within that first year time period. Or you could be like, well, if you wait until like 9 months, then your milk's not going to dry up before you hit, or very unlikely going to dry up before you hit that 1 year mark. And you can get to if that's your goal. What is their goal? Are they wanting to get to the 1 year mark? Are they wanting to tandem feed? How can you support these differing goals? So one of the things that it talks about in this chapter, and then it briefly touched in a previous chapter too, is in the situation of adoption. The infant might be grieving their birth, a mother. And so one of the ways it says in here that could impact them is they may only be willing to form an attachment with the breastfeeding parent before they are ready to attach to another parent. And also, the other spot that it talks about it is back in chapter 1, is that when an infant is grieving the loss of his gestational mother or other caregivers, he responds somatically. So either his digestion or sleep can be negatively impacted. So considering those kind of effects on the infant, what are some ways that we as support people could help the infant through their grieving process?
I think that's just like skin on skin all the
Yeah.
time. I think there is an element to like, and my mom talks about this a lot because she's had all ages as a foster parent. It's like there's only so much you can do because like it's a grieving process and they're probably going to feel guilt. Like, and she's had kids that she had for 7-8 years. They always really loved him, like to the person who gave birth to him. And I think that's just like a reality that I think should be talked about more often, honestly. Even in like I even know situations where it's like open adoptions and like the birth mother was like in their life in some capacity and always favored, even though the adoptive mother was very obviously like had very good attachment with that child as well. So I think it's really interesting to think about. It is. I think you do your best. There's no perfect way.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very much if you can like know the ways that they could be impacted, it just kind of helps frame your reference
For sure.
For what you're dealing with, because like this baby is having digestion issues and they're having problems sleeping, and it's like it's not because you're
No. Yeah.
they're going through a grieving process and you're working through this together.
Yeah.
And just like being able to just have that information as to ground you and where you're at and where this infant is at.
Yeah, and I think it would also depend on how much access you have to the birth mother. Like in the case of a foster parent that's doing visits, I know it would sound strange, but I would ask her to take the baby blankets and get some boob and armpit sweat on them. And when baby's feeling upset, I would do multiple blankets.
And if there's no limitation, visitation all the time.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And even using like her breast milk and her smell and have her picture and video of her and lots of kangaroo care, very attached parenting.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, a lot of skin to skin and that, sort of care. I almost feel like I would approach it from the same way that I, as a postpartum doula, approach it.
Yeah.
Babies are not very happy to see me generally before they've gotten used to me. They're like, you're not the right person. You smell funny. And so those are the sort of things that I do to get them to just accept me as their caregiver and even that temporary of a space. So probably that, but on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea, like, of just the blanket and getting the birth mother's smell. That would be like, as long as you if you have access to the birth mother, that would be fantastic. Like even with non-adoption situations, getting the baby to like sleep not on somewhere that is not like physically touching you, so that method of like getting something that smells like you and putting it like in the in their sleep space. For like I always like to have a shirt that I wore and lay it down underneath them at the.
I think for like surrogacy too, like if you obviously like that's way more premeditated. If you were able to get like the intended mother was able to get like an article of clothing so that as soon as baby was born, they got that smell too. I think that could definitely like have an impact. So it's just like right away.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that smells.
Specifically sweat.
Mhm.
Like your sweat smell is what your baby wants. That's why they cuddle up into your armpit. That's why they stick their head between your breasts. They want to smell you. It's very comforting. Their eyesight's terrible. Their smell is great.
Yeah.
And so that's my, I'll literally be baby wearing a baby, and I take a burp cloth and I'll hand it to mom and say, all right, you know what to do. Stick it under them boobs, give me that boob sweat, and then I put it over me, and the baby's head is laying right on it. And those are that's the very successful, like, until they're used to me,
Yeah, for sure.
So that's where my brain goes.
Yeah.
I love thinking about strong baby smell. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else for this book for the moment?
No. Does anybody else have anything that they wanted to?
How much are we reading in preparation for next month?
Okay, so
How big is section 2?
I think it
And are we just going by sections?
mostly that was how I was.
Okay, section 2 is chapter 4 through 8.
It's 4 chapters.
Yeah. I can read 4 chapters in a month. 1 chapter a week. Just kidding. I'll read 4 chapters tonight.
No,
And finish the last couple of pages the day of, because that's what I did today.
yeah.